What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, I'm going to be talking through the first 10 rounds of those redraft fantasy football drafts, and I'm going to be giving you guys the best picks in every single round. All of these players, I think, have the ability to help you win that championship in 2025 and should be prioritized if you have the chance to draft these players. So without wasting any more time, let's hop right into today's video and let's start talking about these players. All right, so I'm going to kick it off here in the first round. And there is no surprise here. I don't think this is the consensus 101. I'm going with Jamar Chase of the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, this is a player who in 2024 had 1,700 yards, 17 touchdowns, and he finished 74 fantasy points ahead of the wide receiver 2 in fantasy football last year, Justin Jefferson. So it was an absolute dominant year from Jamar Chase. Now, the thing is, nothing's really changed for the Cincinnati Bengals either. This is still a team that's projected to be a top 5 team in pass rate. Their defense is still projected to be very weak, leading to a lot of shootouts here that I'm expecting to happen in 2025 the same way that it did in 2024. And I do think that Jamar Chase is the locked-in wide receiver 1 right now and a player that I would very comfortably take as the 101. And yeah, that might be a cop-out that I'm taking the 101 as the best pick in the round, but Jamar Chase is going to be dominant here in 2025. Let's move on to round 2, and I want to talk about a running back. It's going to be Achane, running back for the Miami Dolphins. This is a player who's currently going around that 203. And I've talked about it a little bit already this offseason, but it was really the tale of two seasons for Achane last year, and it was kind of split up when Tua Tagovailoa was on the football field and when he was off the field. When Tua's on the field, the running back 3 in fantasy points per game, averaging about 19.5 fantasy points per game. He had 6.5 targets per game in those games with Tua, and he averaged a 29% target rate out of the backfield for the Miami Dolphins. Now, without Tua on the football field, this is a player who scored just 7.7 fantasy points per game, and that 29% target rate dropped down to a 12% target rate with Tua off the football field. So that said, he is a very risky player, but he did lead all of the running backs last year in receptions and first read targets. And so like I mentioned, this is going to be a very risky pick. It's going to have boom bust potential in your fantasy football lineups, but I truly do believe that Achane has RB1 overall upside here during the 2025 season. Moving on to round 3, I do have Lamar Jackson as the best selection there. He comes off the board there at the 301. This is a player who dominated last year for the Baltimore Ravens and for our fantasy football teams. He had 16 top 12 finishes, which is the most ever from a fantasy football quarterback, and he added 915 rushing yards on the ground there for us in those fantasy football leagues as well. So if you value those rushing yards the same way that I do, because they are very valuable for fantasy points in our fantasy football leagues, he was pushing 1,000 yards last season. Now, not only that, but this was also a player who ranked number 1 overall in passing rating, yards per attempt, and fantasy points per dropback last season, and was competing for the most valuable player award in the NFL. So we got a chance to see Lamar Jackson here in this Todd Monken offense, and I think it's proven that he is going to be elite in this system moving forward. It wasn't really a surprise. We figured it would happen, but it's proven now. That said, I do think this is a player that's very worthy of that early round pick that you're going to have to spend on him in those 1 quarterback leagues, and I do think he's in contention for the 101 in those super flex drafts. Moving on to round 4, I want to talk about George Kittle. He is the best pick in this round for me, coming off of the board at the 405 for his average draft position. Now, this is a player in 2024 who finished as the tight end 2. He did that with the best yardage that he has seen since 2018, and he had 10 top 5 finishes at the position last year. Going into 2025, this is a San Francisco team that has lost Deebo Samuel. Brandon Ayuk is returning from an ACL injury. Ricky Pearsall is still unproven and dealing with an injury himself, and Juwan Jennings has requested a trade and or looking for new money in a potential holdout situation here for the Niners. Kittle was the number 1 overall player in red zone target rate last year at 33%, and he had 18 red zone catches, which was 4th best amongst all wide receivers and tight ends. If you still have some of the issues here with this wide receiver room going into the 2025 season, I expect that to carry over here during 2025. So even though I'm typically not drafting the tight end position early, I do think this is an elite value pick for you in fantasy football drafts, and George Kittle definitely can finish as the tight end 1 overall over guys like Brock Bowers and Trey McBride. Moving on to round 5, I'm going back to the running back position, I think James Conner is the best pick here in the 5th round. He's coming off the board at the 507, and he's had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons now at the age of 30. And not only that, but he was one of only 3 running backs last year with 15 plus carries and 3 catches per game, and he saw 31% of the Arizona Cardinals touches for the 2nd straight season in a row. Last year, the Arizona Cardinals were a top 7 team in rushing yards, and they are favored in 5 of their first 6 games here during the 2025 season, so we are projecting some more run-heavy game scripts, at least to start off the year here for James Conner. I think it's kind of been the case for a couple years now, but this is just a guy who's very underrated as a running back 2 in your lineups, and I think he has the high-end type of floor, who has the ability to give you those spike RB1 weeks, but also has the safe floor here where he's going to give you that safe running back 2 production almost each and every week. Moving on to round 6, I want to talk about Jameson Williams, wide receiver for the Detroit Lions. Jamo's being drafted right now at the 602, and in 2024, he was a top 20 wide receiver, but he only had 58 catches, and even with that little amount of catches, he crossed that 1,000-yard receiving mark and averaged 17.3 yards per catch. Now, he had 4 games here where he had 20 or more fantasy points per game last year, and the only wide receivers who can match that statistic were Jamar Chase, Mike Evans, and Brian Thomas Jr. That said, I still think this is a player who's going to be projected roughly a 20% target share, and he has the upside here in this Detroit Lions offense to potentially score double-digit touchdowns here during the 2025 season. And even though there is an offensive coordinator change, obviously with Ben Johnson going to the Chicago Bears, I do think he still has the big play ability, and the upside still is there for Jameson Williams to smash for us as a value pick here in the middle rounds. Going on to round 7, I think Odunze is the best player in this round, and he's being drafted at the 706. During his rookie year, he finished as the wide receiver 47. He had 101 targets though, which was 3rd on the team, but even though he saw 100 plus targets, there really weren't any memorable moments for him as a rookie. That said, this is still a top 10 pick in the NFL draft that saw 100 plus targets as a rookie, and that data alone is something that can back up a 2nd-year breakout. With new head coach Ben Johnson in the building, I do expect a little bit more design plays to help get Odunze involved in this offense a lot more than we saw Matt Eberflus getting him involved. And if you just look at the previous Ben Johnson offenses when he was spending time in Detroit, that's going to mean more big plays down the field, deep shots, and more red zone opportunities for Odunze. I know it might be tough because a lot of people didn't get the rookie year that they wanted out of Rome, but I still believe he can be the wide receiver 1 here in Chicago as the long-term answer on offense with Kaleb Williams. I think Ryan Poles did draft Kaleb Williams and Odunze to be the faces of this offense moving forward, and if that were to happen, right now would be a great time for Odunze to break out, and I think it's lining up for him to do it here in 2025. Moving on to round 8, I'm going back to the quarterback position. I think Bo Nix is potentially the best pick in this round. He's coming off of the board at the 804, and during his rookie year, he finished as the QB 10 overall in fantasy football. He had 29 touchdowns, which was 2nd all-time amongst rookie quarterbacks, and basically from week 5 on, after that first month of the NFL season was underway, Bo Nix was the quarterback 6 overall, averaging 21.9 fantasy points per game, and he showed a lot of elite accuracy traits, especially inside of the 10 where he was throwing at a 71% completion rate. This is also a quarterback that averaged 25 rushing yards per game, ranked 7th most in fantasy points per dropback, and was 9th in rushing fantasy points per game here during his rookie season. And then you account for the fact that Denver has added onto the offensive side of the football with rookie RJ Harvey out of the backfield who can help catch some footballs and probably break off some big plays, and Evan Engram in that tight end position, plus the fact that this is likely going to be a playoff team again here during the 2025 season. I just really like the outlook for Bo Nix and think he provides some of that rushing upside that we want out of the quarterback position, meaning he's one of the better picks that you can make later in your drafts if you're waiting on QB. Moving on to round 9, I'm going to go to a rookie running back, and I think Kaleb Johnson is potentially the best pick here. Obviously, the rookie running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers, he's being drafted at the 901, right there at that 8-9 turn, so maybe kind of cheating on this one again, but I still wanted to talk about Kaleb Johnson. 6'1", 224 pounds, accounted for 76% of Iowa's total offensive yardage in 2024, and he posted a 52% dominator rating out of college, which is absolutely fantastic when you see that out of a prospect. I have him outproducing Jaylen Warren this year. As far as projections go, I have him significantly out-touching him, and I think he fits this Arthur Smith scheme very, very well here in Pittsburgh. And when you look at Steelers running backs that have been under Arthur Smith over the past couple of years, these guys get huge workloads. Just look at Najee Harris, who averaged about 319 touches per year during his time with the Steelers. That said, if you're drafting Kaleb Johnson in your drafts, you can now add him as your running back 3 on your lineups. And I think by the time that the end of the year gets around, as we get into those colder months, weeks 12 on, I do believe that Kaleb Johnson can be a locked and loaded every single week RB2 in our lineups. And now moving on to my last and final player here in round 10 to finish off these top 10 rounds. I do have Tucker Kraft, the tight end for the Green Bay Packers, as the best selection in this round. He's coming off the board with an ADP of 10.4. And last year in 2024, he was the tight end 9 overall, had 700 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns as well. And he was likely an undrafted tight end gem that you added off of the waiver wire in most of your leagues. That said, he also led all of tight ends in yards after catch with 8.8 yards after the catch as the average. And he only did that on 2.9 catches per game. There's a chance that Tucker Kraft might end up being a little bit more touchdown dependent than we actually want him to be, but he's still going to be on one of the league's better offenses, and I do believe that they're still going to have him very involved in this offense as one of the best pass catchers that they have. So when you consider that, this is probably a better late round flyer. Like I said, we're in the double-digit rounds now, with round 10 being the round that we're looking at, and I do think he has some boom potential if the usage picks up, and maybe they start getting a couple more receptions going his way each week. All right, so there you have it. We just went through the top 10 rounds of those redraft fantasy football drafts, and those are the best players that I think you guys should be drafting in each of those rounds. As always, if you guys liked today's video, make sure you hit that like button for me. It is the best free way to show this channel some support. Also, make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel, trying to get to 10K subscribers by the end of the NFL season. And last but not least, make sure you go join our free Discord. We do have a community of 500 plus people in there that are talking fantasy football 24/7, 365, and we'd love for you to be a part of that community. That way you guys can join that and talk some fantasy football with us as well. So with all of that being said, I have nothing else for you guys today, so I will see you on our next episode. But until then, peace out.